I love this question. I always say to clients, if my job was just as simple as telling you what and what not to eat, I wouldn't have a job for much longer because that's Googleable. But then emotions and behavior and stuff all come into play, and that's where it gets more convoluted.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here going, like, if you articulate it like that to half the health and wellness population, like, we're all good. Hey, I'm Zeb.
And I'm Maddi.
And welcome to the We Don't Know Yet podcast. Whilst both Maddi and I are healthcare practitioners, we understand that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to healthcare. Should you require any medical attention, please seek out your local healthcare practitioner. Sorry, I feel like mine's very unprofessional versus yours.
No, it's fine. It's just because I got an iPad. It looks fancy.
I've just got my piss paper, everyone. My piss paper with my questions here that I wrote down.
Bring back old handwriting.
Old school, new school.
You know what? I actually handwrite on this anyway.
Yeah, I know you
it's
do.
only because like the ADHD side of me loses everything that is loose or paper based.
Yeah.
So I'm just all
I'm saving up for an iPad.
It's pretty good. Or what's the ones that heaps of professionals have at the moment? It's like an iPad with no screen and you just write and it converts to text and goes to your computer.
Yeah. I don't know.
Bugger, the names escape me.
Yeah, but Maddi was so excited to show me this new app that she had on her iPad where she could write and then it would auto convert it into a text.
It's pretty cool. It is pretty cool. If you know the name of what I'm thinking of, please reach out because it has completely escaped my mind. Yes, but if you listen to our last episode, basically what Zeb and I are doing over the next, well, this is the second and final episode.
The next two.
The next two.
The next one.
Yeah, this is
this
two
episode.
Two. This one and the previous one.
Yeah.
Basically, we're talking about a passion point for each of us. So Zeb touched on in our last episode, like why behavior change is so hard and particularly like focusing on the healthcare industry as a whole. Or behavior change in the healthcare industry, I should say. Mine is about intuitive eating today. And Zeb's got 3 questions prepared. I don't know what they are. He's going to hit me with some questions and I'm going to answer them.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
about
excited.
It. Yes.
I feel like last time we actually did, because we've done one in the past about
intuitive eating.
No, just like we unpacked a little bit of like who we are. So if you don't actually know what Maddi and I do, go back and watch. I think it's like episode 11 and 12.
God, you have a good memory.
Yeah, Maddi is in the disordered eating diet space. Dietitian space.
I don't know why I didn't love her. Yeah, shout out. No, yes, I am.
And I think this is going to be really interesting because I've got some conflicting beliefs on a lot of this stuff.
And I'm incredibly biased towards it all. So.
And I'm incredibly biased against a lot of different things.
It's a part of being human. We're all fundamentally biased.
So I think this will be really cool because it'll challenge my perspective on it too, which is really good.
Yes.
But we're discussing intuitive eating, which is a topic that Maddi works quite closely with in her practice.
It is.
Or a practice that she works with quite closely in her profession.
Yes. Both sounded good.
They both sounded good.
Yeah.
We're going to roll with both of them. Anyway.
Yeah, both are true.
But it's something that I don't really understand and know too much about.
Okay.
So I think it'll be cool to unpack a little bit. My first question for you, Maddi. Are you ready?
Yep.
Cool.
Actually, should I start by explaining what intuitive eating is? Or is that in your question?
I feel like it's going to...
You asked the question.
I feel like it's going to fit into question 1 anyway.
Okay.
So question 1 is, how do people even get a feel for intuitive eating? How do they know if they are full or if they are not? And I'm happy for that to also include a little bit of a description about what intuitive eating actually is.
Cool. And I guess as a bit of a disclaimer before we go into the rest of the episode, this is really like a top level or brief overview of it all. Like obviously with any topic, there's so many different rabbit holes and it's very nuanced, like all these different avenues that we can go down. So I'm going to try and keep it short because I have a tendency to blabble. But I guess in a nutshell, intuitive eating is all about tuning out the outside buzz. So people telling you what, when and how much to eat and really tuning into your body's inner wisdom. And I know that sounds really weird and wanky, but it's really trusting and building on like your hunger and fullness cues, which I'll touch on more. But it's also so much more than that as well. It's like really fulfilling both the physical and the emotional aspects that, eating is involved with, because food is not just for physical purposes. It also is emotional, which I'm sure we'll touch on later. Yeah. So it's really tuning back into your body, reconnecting your body's inner wisdom and making food choices that are both physically and emotionally, aligned.
You know what? I've just had like a massive light bulb moment. So like intuitive eating, like we talk about natural ways of going about things all the time, right?
Yep.
like I'm just trying to recall a topic that we've covered to give an example, but like, for example, the discussion about like gut microbiome, right? And we were like looking at unpacking how it's really good to have a really diverse like gut microbiome, and that's something that's quite a natural bodily response that, you know, like it doesn't involve like medications and all that kind of jizz and jazz and external noise. And I've only just like light bulb moment that intuitive eating is like the same thing. It's like a natural way of like cueing, like getting rid of all the external biases and like people's judgment and it's actually just it's
Love
like
it.
your own body's, it's like a body clock. It's like sleep. It's like we were talking about with sleep earlier.
Absolutely. I always liken it to a toddler. Like they are intuitive eaters. They'll tell you what, when, and how much they want to eat.
Yeah.
Like then
they'll cry.
And then they'll cry. They'll cry if they're hungry. They'll tell you when they're full. They'll tell you if you don't want that. Like they're not listening to Woman's Weekly or some shit. I don't know. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
There
So
you go.
in a nutshell, that's what it is. Look, it does comprise of 10 different principles. Maybe we'll go through them later. Maybe we won't. Look it up. But it's not just about like hunger and fullness. But I guess to answer your question, when it comes to like getting more in tune with your hunger and fullness, there are definitely a few steps, I guess, that somebody could take with that. So I always use like practical examples and practical sort of like strategies with my clients. So something called the hunger fullness scale, essentially scale 1 to 10, 1 being so hungry you're like going to faint, 10 being so full you're like Christmas Day full, really uncomfortably full. And between like
kind of full.
The best kind of full. Food coma, have a nap. So good. Love Christmas Day. I guess between like 4 and 6 or 4 and 7, it's kind of like that sweet spot, mind the pun. But like we want to be hungry. We want to be able to recognize when we're slightly hungry because that prevents us from getting like too hungry where we're going to be ravished and like more likely to overeat. And on the other end, we, want to be around a 6 or a 7 in fullness because that means we're going to be substantiated for a few hours. So I often give clients the homework or the exercise, and I don't give homework to all my clients, but this is a really good case where it can be helpful of like physically using that scale before and after every meal for maybe a week or 2, and it helps them get a lot more in tune with their hunger and fullness cues.
Okay, that's interesting. And I like that it's kind of quite simple from the perspective, like if I was going to the gym, like a lot of the time you want to be working at like a 6 to 7 out of 10, like in terms of work rate. Or like a 7, 8 out of 10 if you want to like push yourself. But this is like that real, as you said, pun intended, like sweet spot of like trying to find that element of fullness or element of.
Yeah. Similar, I guess, to how trainers do like the 1 to 8 RPE, or I actually don't know what that is.
I think it's still a 1 to 10 RPE.
Yeah, but like if someone prescribes like an exercise, like for example, I have a run coach at the moment and he'll give me a run and he's like, do 10K at like an 8 RPE. And I like that he does that instead of saying do this pace, because an 8 out of 10 is going to be different on different days.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Kind of similar but kind of different. Okay,
that makes a little bit of sense.
Yes.
Well, I'm curious to unpack the next topic because this is something that, like I said, I this is where I start to get really conflicted.
Yes.
With the intuitive eating space from the perspective of like sometimes I feel like there's particular scenarios when looking at food might be like okay.
Yeah.
But how does that intuitive eating model fit within the realms of things like a performance model where like, and like this is just one realm, right? So like I'm using performance because I think it's probably something that contrasts like really heavily.
Yep.
But like in the performance realm, and you know what, now that I'm saying it, I feel like in the post-performance, like especially elite level athletes, a lot of them would come out with like disordered eating.
Yes.
But
I have a lot of athlete clients.
Yeah. How does that intuitive eating fit in with that performance realm? Because I feel like the performance side of things, you're always looking at macro nutrients, micronutrients, like caloric intake, and like how you're managing a lot of that to make sure that like you got enough energy, you're not getting to the stage where you're fatiguing and getting injured. How does that kind of fit in?
Good question. I love this. And actually, it's a tricky one, right? Because it is so nuanced. I'll try my best to answer it.
Yeah.
I think coming back to the fact, as we were just talking about, that it's very, very common for athletes to struggle with disordered eating. And I think this is a big reason why. I've had a lot of clients that have been athletes across varying degrees of professionalism. Like I've had clients that have gone to the Olympics and struggled with disordered eating because there's such a focus on nutrition for performance.
Yeah.
And absolutely it plays a fundamental role, like without a doubt. But I think when we're focusing so much on an external source to dictate what we need to eat, it can get very restrictive in terms of like, I can only eat X amount of calories, and that more or less is it can just be a guesstimation. Like if it's not coming from a professional or a dietitian, it can just be a guesstimation at best, and it might not be right for you.
Yeah.
That as well as like, you know, different outputs on different days and just being a human in general, like we don't need the same set amount of calories every single day.
Yeah.
So when we're focusing too much on that and we're ignoring our body cues, that can be really problematic. Intuitive eating, I think there's a big misconception that it's eating whatever, whenever, or eating these like quote unquote bad foods all the time, right? Like if I don't have any rules around food, if I can eat whatever, of course I'm naturally going to go to foods that aren't going to be in alignment with my performance, I guess, like things that are, you know, higher in fat, higher in sugar, like bad, I guess. I'm using bunny ears as well for anyone that is listening, because like obviously it's very contradictory to have such a black and white view on food. But that is absolutely not the case. So one of the principles of intuitive eating is gentle nutrition. It's the 10th and the final principle. And a big part of gentle nutrition is eating foods that are good for like the body and also eating foods that are good for the soul. So yes, not having rules around foods that are labeled as quote unquote bad, but also making choices that are in alignment with your physical health too. Like that, what's it called? That food body congruence. So we're making choices about food that go beyond just our taste buds. We're not just eating things that, you know, always taste good. We're actually making choices around food that physically make us feel good as well. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. That makes a lot of sense. And I suppose, you know, from that side of things as well, that I think performance-wise, a lot of those athletes tend to like have a lot of physical activity. It doesn't really matter. And like you see with athletes sometimes as well, like they're not really looking at foods that are bad or foods that are
well, the foods that are bad are often like the good, you know, the perfect workout snacks.
Yeah, yeah. I recently saw a Instagram like series that one of my colleagues did. He's a PT, but he was talking about the fact that like and doing a reel of I think the real series is something along the lines of I'm going to show you that you can eat a bar of chocolate every day and not be a bad thing that's going to impact your like livelihood.
Yeah, yeah.
Because he was just like, at the end of the day, like, you know, like eating a bar of chocolate, what is it in the grand scheme of things? Like it's something you enjoy. Like why would you put such a heavy restriction around something like that?
Yeah.
But yeah, that makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, a little bit.
I suppose like, because then I start to think about like the macro and micronutrient side of things with like blood tests and like B12 levels and iron levels and all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah.
How does it then like if I'm looking at that side of stuff too?
Yeah.
Are there ways that you can layer in some of those micro and macronutrients to the intuitive eating
for sure
space? For
sure. Like let's say things with if someone has, I'm going to use an example of like a woman with PCOS and insulin resistance, then having, I guess, sort of like no rules around food, so to speak, like that's obviously, I can understand how that can be easily misinterpreted as not helpful for someone with like a health condition like that. But intuitive eating is still like, again, that food body congruence. It's like, okay, well, I know that I can't eat, you know, I need to have more of a varied diet. I can't just eat, you know, carbs without any fats or proteins or veggies. Like I can't just have one sole macronutrient. I need to have a varied and balanced diet. But it's more in like, I guess it's not through a restrictive lens. It's more like, let's bring more of the good stuff in instead of I can't have X, I can't have Y, because that's naturally going to make us want it more. And that's where that disordered relationship with food happens.
Yeah. Okay. And it's kind of, for the first time ever having this conversation now, I think it's finally starting to click a little bit from the perspective that I've never really understood what you meant when you mean like bring more food in.
Yeah.
And like not being of that restrictive nature. Like you can still intuitively eat, but have like, you know, like bigger whole food meals that like, and there's an element there which is like, obviously I'm assuming here, but would be like education around like different foods and things like that.
Absolutely.
People can like prep and meal and like eat and do, and when they are feeling hungry, like some like things that they can eat because you want them to eat.
And it's foods that are, you know, physically making them feel good, making them feel like satisfied for an extended period of time. So, you know, if someone's eating, I don't know, like just lollies all day, every day, like that's not going to substantiate them. Not that there's anything wrong with lollies, but it's just if we have too much of anything and disregard other avenues or other food groups, then that's where I guess it gets problematic.
Skewed,
So it's having that varied diet. It's making choices that are informed for your health, but not through a restrictive lens. And
I don't know why I've never been able to like separate the restrictive and the word intuitive eating, or like it's only, I'm honestly like mind blown right now because it's only just hit me that like they're two very different things.
Yeah. And like as much as I can understand, it sounds woo-woo, and I'll pop it in the show notes. There's one notable study that I'm thinking of, but there's been so many studies to show that when you have that intuitive approach to eating, your intake of fruits, veggies, whole grains, like all the foods that are quote unquote healthy, and they are absolutely, is higher than if you go, I need to eat these foods and I can't have X, Y, Z foods because they're bad for my health. You're naturally going to gravitate more towards those because now they're forbidden.
Wow.
It's very interesting.
It is so interesting. And I just like, again, I think every time we talk about the non-diet like space or non-diet eating or anything related to that diet space, but from a non-restrictive perspective, even though it's like a non-restrictive perspective, I can't believe I have never been able to disassociate the restrictive nature of the actual practice.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like I've always kind of sat there and gone, intuitive eating, like, God, that's restrictive. Like it's like you know, you're really like being particular and like the way that you eat or something along those lines. It's actually the opposite.
Yeah,
it's
no,
like
not at all.
you're removing the restrictive nature of it.
Yep.
And you're changing the education around the food, and then you're building that practice.
Yeah.
So.
And look, it's a process, right? Like a big part is dismantling all those beliefs and rules that you naturally have inherited about food over the course of just like living in this world. And then getting to a point of going, okay, like I know I should be having X serves of veggies, X serve of whole grains, X serves of fruit, whatever.
Yeah.
This is what I'm currently having. How can I bring more of those things in if there are any gaps? Wow. Yeah. So it's still health improving, but I guess not fostering such a black and white relationship with food.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, this kind of leads really nicely into the last question. But obviously, like intuitively, we're trying to get in touch with our like our body and its like needs, but also like our emotions and our thought process and everything like that.
Yep.
How does the emotional aspect of things fit with the intuitive eating space as well? Because I feel like when I'm emotional or I'm stressed or you know, there's like some of those key cues in my life. I will just binge or I'll like pivot or like my food habits change, or how does that emotional aspect of it then guide that intuitive eating process?
I love this question because it is so like, if I always say to clients, if my job was just as simple as like telling you what and what not to eat, I wouldn't have a job for much longer because that's Googleable. Yeah. But then emotions and behavior and stuff all come into play, and that's where it gets more convoluted. One of the principles of intuitive eating, they recently changed the name, so I'll say the new one, is coping with your emotions with kindness. So what that is identifying like your patterns of maybe emotional or binge eating and going, okay, like these are my triggers, stress, tiredness, whatever. How can I show these emotions a little bit more kindness and empathy without always using food as a crutch?
Right.
So it's building a bit of a toolbox of like other ways to cope with those emotions so that the emphasis isn't so heavily on using food to feel better, because again, that's where it becomes a bit tricky.
Yeah, nice. So looking at more behavior change around some of those other triggers essentially.
Yep.
and guiding that process down those avenues versus the food space itself.
Yeah. And as I said earlier, like a little bit earlier on in someone's intuitive eating journey, it's really dismantling those beliefs or those rules around food, which can bring up a lot of mixed emotions. So that can be quite tricky in of itself. But I guess the goal is to put food all on a moral, even moral playing field, which then reduces like the shame and the stress and the guilt when we're eating said quote unquote bad food.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many parts to it.
Yeah. And I've never, yeah. Okay. Wow. Because you're right. And like this kind of comes back to a bit of behavioral change and stuff like that. But I can see how someone getting a bit more sleep, or like if sleep's a trigger for their binge eating or emotional eating.
Yep.
Like using some of those other behavioral change strategies to really bolster their intuitive eating process on the side whilst addressing the emotional triggers.
Yes.
Can be really beneficial.
Yeah, like that in tandem with, I guess, as I said before, like just seeing all foods as okay. Like, because if someone's really stressed and then they go for chocolate and then they're like that whole shame spiral starts and they're like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. Like, this is bad. Again, it's just going to have like a sort of, excuse my French, but like what the fuck effect. It's like, oh, fuck it, I've already blown it. Like I might as well keep going. Yeah. Whereas if you're like, no, I can have chocolate. Like I give myself permission to eat chocolate, but I'm also going to, you know, tender to this emotion in maybe a more productive way. There's no shame. There's no guilt. Food isn't the baddie.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. I'm actually impressed with how I've answered things. I was really nervous.
I'm really impressed as well. This has probably been the most like, I don't even know how to describe it, like the most well-articulated concept. And for me, so huge preface here, I've had like a really big bias on like the whole like
it's very
intuitive
misunderstood.
eating space, just because I haven't, and you're right, like I probably haven't well understood the actual practices behind it. But you know, you always think like there's a like, and this is my bias, no one judge me for it, but like, you know, when you're in the health and wellness space a little bit, you're kind of looking at like the low-hanging fruits a lot.
Yes.
And there's this perceived understanding of like what an ideal nutrition aspect of things kind of looks like.
Yeah.
But I've always thought that, you know, like intuitive eating just sat into this realm of like eating whatever, you know, whatever you want and not really having that education around it. But yeah, it's been very well articulated to me today that it's not the case at all, and I was very wrong.
Yeah, no, not at all. And it's such a big common misconception. Like it does get a bad rap for that reason, but no, it's still health improving. Like it's focusing on adding more of the good stuff in, but not from a you need to have this instead of this sort of way.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, there you go.
Amazing.
Wow, I hope you guys got as much from that as I did, because I'm kind of like, this happens to me. I need to stop getting so mind blown. I think almost every episode, I know, but almost every episode I have this moment where I just like I just sit there and like look at the camera and just like, I'm
gobsmacked.
I'm just like speechless and I can't talk. And I'm like, my words are not wording. To quote Maddi.
Glad, my words are not wording.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know what is happening. But it happens every podcast. Have you seen it? Every podcast. I reckon I sit there and I just have a moment where I'm like.
Well, we talk to some incredible people about some pretty amazing things.
I've had that many mind-blowing moments. Like I can even reel them off. Like that's how mind-blown I get during these episodes. But no, that's fantastic. Oh, there you go.
I'm glad I answered.
And so what? So like resource-wise for people, because like I think this is going to be a great resource for everyone.
Yeah.
But intuitive eating wise, like where do people turn to for like resources about intuitive eating?
There's heaps of books. I'm going to do a shameless self-plug here. I've got a free ebook as well that I can pop in the show notes. The Sweet Spot with Food Kickstart Kit that kind of just gets you started on that journey, and then I guess what the next steps look like. There's heaps of resources. Like you can do self-help ones, DIY ones, or if you want someone to work alongside you, I guess that's where working with a non-diet dietitian can be really, really beneficial.
Dude, you need to do a PDME. Honestly.
Happily. It's funny, like when you're behind the scenes of like doing it all, you're like, what professional can I get in? And then I often forget that like we are professionals.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here going, shit, like if you articulate it like that to half the health and wellness population, like we're all good.
Everyone's fine.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so I'll pop it in the show notes, a few of my favorite books and some of my own resources as well, but it won't all just be about me.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the last couple of episodes. We're hoping to do a bit more of these.
I think these are good. I think we should continue doing them. If you like them, let us know. Like, subscribe, share it with a mate, pop in the comments.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, we're both from different industries. So, like, Maddi is obviously in the dietetic space.
Yep.
And, like, I'm in the osteo space. So if you guys have topics that you want us to
let us know,
unpack, like adjustments.
Yeah. Can you crack my back?
What the hell that is after this.
All of the at APRA.
Yeah, at APRA. Maybe not after this. Maybe in a professional treatment room.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Love. Thanks for listening to this week's podcast.
Be the first to know when the next episode drops by hitting subscribe on wherever you catch your podcasts.
And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at we don't know yet.pod.
See ya.